So this is an extract from the very first page of Magpie Murders, in which an editor, Susan Ryeland, is about to read the manuscript of the book. I lit a cigarette. I began to read the book, as you are about to. But before you do that, I have to warn you. This book changed my life. You may have read that before. I'm embarrassed to say, but I splashed it on the cover of the first novel I ever commissioned, a very ordinary Second World War thriller. I can't even remember who said it, but the only way that book was going to change someone's life was if it fell on them. Is it ever actually true? I still remember reading the Bronte sisters as a very young girl and falling in love with their world, the melodrama, the wild landscapes, the gothic romance of it all. You might say that Jane Eyre steered me towards my career in publishing, which is a touch ironic in view of what happened. There are plenty of books that have touched me very deeply. Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go, Ian McEwan's Atonement. I'm told that a great many children suddenly found themselves in boarding school as a result of the Harry Potter phenomenon. And throughout history, there have been books that have had a profound effect on our attitudes. Lady Chatterley's Lover is one obvious example. 1984, another. But I'm not sure it actually matters what we read. Our lives continue along the straight lines that have been set out for us. Fiction merely allows us a glimpse of the alternative. Maybe that's one of the reasons we enjoy it. But Magpie Murders really did change everything for me. Magpie Murders is both a whodunit and an examination of whodunits. It looks at the relationship between the author, the detective, and the reader. It asks the question, why do we read murder stories at all? And it is at the same time a murder story. In fact, it's two murder stories for the price of one. I had the idea for Magpie Murders about 15 years ago, and it came actually from reading Sherlock Holmes. I was very interested in the fact that Conan Doyle created this amazing character and hated him so much that he kicked him off the Rack-and-Back Falls. And that set me thinking about writing a book about a whodunit writer and his relationship with his main character. What really excites me about this book is the fact that it's me, it's my book. For once, I'm not hiding in the shadow of Ian Fleming or Conan Doyle or anyone else. It's not a continuation novel. It's a book I've wanted to write for a very, very long time. And what excites me in particular is that so far, nobody has guessed the ending. That matters to me a lot. Magpie Murders is a novel about a novelist, about a writer called Alan Conway, who is the best-selling author of a series of books, the Atticus Pund detective series. And the first thing to say about Alan Conway is he is not based on me in any way at all. In fact, he is a complete swine. He's not a very pleasant man. And the more we learn about him, the more we realise how very unpleasant he is. And part of the fun of the book for me has been one writer looking at another, looking at the whole mechanism of writing and what it means to be a best-selling author. In his case, I'm afraid, he is very far from grateful. You have no idea how much work went into this book, just planning it. I think I must have spent a whole year planning and thinking about it and making notes before I even wrote the first word. The trick was to make sure that all the clues were on the page. You can actually guess the whole thing pretty much from the first page in the book, but at the same time it had to be incredibly complicated in its sort of construction. Easy to read, complicated to write. At the end of the day, I felt like one of those telephone engineers when I got to the end of the book with these two cables, each one of which had about 150 wires, multicolored wires coming out. They all had to connect somehow, and I'm happy to say that with a little bit of cutting and trimming, they did. A lot of my books do need research, particularly the James Bond book or the Sherlock Holmes books, which require 19th century knowledge. One of the joys of writing Magpie Murders was that actually it didn't need a great deal of physical research. I had to look up poisons and stuff like that, and it's set in the 1950s, or at least part of it is, so I had to I was born in 55, so I have some sort of vestigial memory of it. But in fact, at the end of the day, this is not a research-heavy book. I mean, it's the plot, it's the mystery, it's the characters that really matter. Certainly, I've always been a great fan of what has been called the golden age of detective fiction, by which I mean Agatha Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers, Ellery Queen, and many others. And I wanted to bring those values into the book. Even the title, Magpie Murders, in a way reflects Agatha Christie's habit of using folk songs and verses as the structure of her books. And I do hope that the book is in its way a sort of a love letter to that type of writing. It has a nasty twist on it. It does modernise it and go in a very unexpected direction, but that's where it began. I've always loved Agatha Christie. I've read all her books, of course. I've adapted many of them for television, and this book, Magpie Murders, certainly owes a great deal to Agatha Christie. In fact, one of the nicest things in it for me is the fact that her grandson, Matthew Pritchard, actually turns up as a character in the book. We had a fantastic lunch together talking about his grandmother, and I then put him in, as I say, as a character. What it is not is an Agatha Christie pastiche. It is not a parody or an homage. It's not a continuation novel, but it uses a great deal of the techniques that she really invented and examines them and then gives them a very modern and unexpected twist. My favourite author is Charles Dickens. The past is another country. They do things differently there. That's the opening of L.P. Hartley's The Go-Between. Great first line in a book. Writing. My favourite book of all time changes, but it's probably Great Expectations, Charles Dickens. I have a collection of fountain pens and I always choose the right fountain pen for each novel, and that's my main ritual. I loved Les Parisiennes by Anne Sever. There's no book I wish I had written. I read lots of books and love books, but I'm just happy to have written the ones I did. What's a whodunit? I'll go for the whodunit. I think Captain Corelli's Mandolin most shocked me because it didn't have a happy enough ending. Louis de Bernier. The best thing about being a writer is having readers. 3 authors have influenced me. Ian Fleming, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Charles Dickens. I'll never forget getting my first novel as a book in the post, The Real Thing, being a published author. My favourite quote is by William Goldman in Adventures in the Screen Trade. Nobody knows anything. It's completely true. I can read anywhere, but my favourite place to read is a cemetery. My favourite character in a book outside Bond or Holmes would have to be Harry Flashman, as invented by George MacDonald Fraser. My favourite place to write is Suffolk, Orford in particular, which is where Magpie Murders is set. I'm very easily starstruck, and I have met 2 or 3 people who have been real heroes of mine, but I'm not going to tell you who they were because that would be awful name dropping. I'm not sure who said this to me, but believe in yourself. Keep going. Those are the best words anyone ever said. It's interesting, but the more I love a book, the more often I'm disappointed by the film, but I'd say The Lord of the Rings was probably as good as it gets. I speak reasonably good Greek. That always surprises me, so it may surprise you. Loneliness. For Alex Rider, I've done odd things, climbing onto the roof of the Science Museum, climbing up a crane outside the Houses of Parliament and operating it. But by and large, these days, the internet does help an awful lot. Not good at maths.